granted, if they're in a good mood one day, you can know a little bit more about how John F. Kennedy was murdered in 1963. You have an absolute moral right to know because you own it.
I happen to think that the border is the single biggest issue. I think the border is a bigger issue than inflation. Somebody said, does you ramble? I said, I don't ramble. I do the weave. I cover many, many subjects. And you always come back to the right. That's genius. There's a difference between rambling and genius.
During the fireside chat, Trump also shared thoughts on potential figures in his future administration. Carlson asked whether Trump would have Kennedy and Elon Musk, and if they would be influential figures in his administration. Trump replied that he believes they will. The event also served as a fundraiser for Hurricane Helene relief.
Trump or Harris? Trump? Oh, yeah. For you, what's the biggest issue? What matters to you most?
You know, you want to have your kids
I think about
in a proper
women's
place
rights,
where they can get good schooling.
LGBTQ
So if
community.
you don't have
Trump or
that,
Harris?
you can't get to those places.
Trump.
You have to
Can I ask
settle
what
for
your
that.
biggest issue is?
I look at
Or
the
from
individual
on?
person,
Any preference?
and if that person is a
I
better
prefer Jesus
opportunity,
Christ.
give us a
Talking
better
with voters
opportunity,
here, we've heard
I'm going
similar
that way.
concerns
Yeah.
across.
I'm not going with somebody just because he's Democrat or Republican. I need somebody that's going to help the people out.
If you were to vote right now, who do you think it would be?
Father God, I'm not gonna give who I'm gonna vote because that's my option. But you know, it's got to be a better vision.
Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is seizing on the latest jobs report, which shows that only 12,000 jobs were created in October, and thus far below the original estimate of 120,000 jobs created, and is the lowest in 4 years. While the Trump campaign is accusing Vice President Harris's economic policies of, quote, wiping out 30,000 private sector jobs and nearly 50,000 manufacturing jobs, the Biden White House is stressing that these job losses stem from the recent deficit.
Heavily across the state. So where is Georgia's 16 important electoral college votes going to go? Well, we're here on the ground in Georgia to get a read on which way the state will swing. Trump or Harris? Ask her. Trump or Harris?
I don't know.
Who do you think it's going to be?
Trump, Harris, same.
I don't really care.
Harris. Trump.
Trump or Harris? Who's it going to be? Trump?
Oh yeah.
For you, what's the biggest issue? What matters to you most?
This economy is what matters.
Harris. I think about women's rights, LGBTQ community.
Trump or Harris?
Trump.
Trump? Can I ask what your biggest issue is?
Work for my money.
Any preference?
I prefer Jesus Christ.
Talking with voters here, we've heard similar concerns across.
And contribute to their 401k plans next year will now be $23,500. This also applies to 403bs and the federal government's thrift savings plan. The revision is part of the Internal Revenue Service's annual cost of living adjustment for pension plans and other retirement accounts, but the limit for IRA contributions will remain at $7,000. The additional $1,000 IRA catch-up contribution for people 50 and over will also remain the same. And October's jobs report ravaged by hurricanes and work stoppages. The U.S. added 12,000 jobs, while economists expected over 100,000. Analysts give us their take. Take a look.
Job market's
October's
down.
job report is hit by storms and strikes. Economists expected 100,000 added jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics found 1,200. In its words, payroll employment was essentially unchanged.
There's a little bit of maybe artificialness to some of those losses of jobs numbers.
Analyst Aaron Sorkina says the Boeing strike erased over 40,000 jobs from the numbers. And it's showing signs of resolving. And hurricanes paused economic activity in the southeast.
You might see some of those numbers pop back fairly quickly, but either way, the market seems to like it because it probably means an increased likelihood that we're going to see another quarter point rate decrease at the next Fed meeting.
Despite the distortions from bad weather and striking machinists,
it actually is consistent with the big picture, which is that the labor market is growing, but flowing. ZipRecruiter chief economist Julia Pollock says that in the past 2 quarters, job gains have been below the pre-pandemic average by about 100,000.
This is a broad trend and the direct results of restrictive monetary policy delaying investments and causing employers to be more cautious about expanding and hiring.
Pollock says the labor market might reheat as interest rates normalize, but there's no evidence that's happening yet.
Interest rate has a big thing
Indonesia
to do
said
with
it has banned the sales of Google smartphones because of rules requiring locally made components. These rules require certain smartphones sold in Indonesia to
no tax on overtime.
The people who work overtime are among the hardest working citizens in our country. And for too long, no one in Washington has been looking out for them.
And one man will refuse to fall. So America and its workers can continue to stand great again.
Right for America is
3 or 4 years through inflation. You know, the chemicals we use, the fertilizers, the sprays that we use, the harvesters went from like $300,000 to $500,000 to $600,000.
And what expectations do supporters of Vice President Kamala Harris have for a Harris-Walz administration? Besides, with new Treasury securities being issued, many bought by foreign investors as domestic demand weakens. Meanwhile, economists warn the debt outlook remains uncertain. It isn't expected to stabilize by 2029. McDonald's reported a larger...
Short of endorsing rival Hillary Clinton. It cited serious reservations about Clinton's suitability for the role. Still to come, the Supreme Court is expected to decide whether Virginia can remove...
Hanging out of the garbage truck and speaking to reporters. The stunt comes after President Biden apparently referred to Trump supporters as garbage in a video call yesterday. The White House has clarified Biden's position, and Vice President Kamala Harris called on Americans to, quote, turn the page on the drama and the conflict. President Trump responding to President Biden's comments that many are interpreting as referring to his supporters as garbage. This comes as both Trump and Harris are home in battleground states. And to the
weekend before the general election, he's hitting the streets, knocking on doors, and ringing many doorbells. He was in Marietta Saturday working to get out the vote.
Going home.
Even if nobody's available to listen at every home.
This is the life of a canvasser.
Zamora says he hopes his efforts make an impact.
I want to make sure that folks go and vote and elect someone that is going to represent their best interests.
Zamora says this is his first time volunteering this election season, but says he has done this for about a decade. He's working with Mahente PAC. The group says it's the largest progressive Latino organization in the U.S. While this is a partisan canvas, Zamora has nonpartisan voter guides on hand.
You need to know where the candidates stand, and then hopefully people know where they stand, and then they can make a well-informed choice.
This canvas comes after a record-breaking early voting period in Georgia, where more than half of registered voters cast a ballot. The homes volunteers went to Saturday are those who didn't vote early in Cobb and Gwinnett, the Georgia counties with the largest Latino population.
What we've seen is that people who haven't voted in the past need that extra push and that extra reminder of why it's so important.
Zamora says he's doing this to be neighborly because he believes no matter who you vote for, you should at least do it.
I think everyone should vote.
This canvassing effort.
The Border Patrol, by the way, 5 days ago endorsed me, which is something they're not even really supposed to do. And in endorsing me, they gave it a full-throated endorsement, but and endorsed me. They said how horrible she is. And it's not easy for them to say that. You know, this is the vice president.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com.
Are hungry. Resources are important. We want candidates who are able to support the things that are important to us.
They don't want to vote because they realize or they think it's not going to matter. And as you just raised, we are at 22-25% poverty rate. So they don't care and they won't vote because they don't think it's going to make a difference. And as you saw today in one of our meetings that we had here today at Mother's Nest, we had a speaker that talked the importance, and I myself tell them the importance of getting out and vote. And by the show of hands and participation, they don't want to do it because they feel left out. They feel like nobody cares.
In Bibb County, Georgia, 47,000 eligible voters apparently aren't casting ballots. That's 4 times the margin by which President Biden won the state in 2020. Many of these non-voters are struggling financially. Vice President Harris's candidacy may not be enough to motivate them to vote. At the Mother's Nest baby supply organization in Macon, only 6 out of 30 women said they plan to vote. Executive Director Sabrina Friday says many are focused more on survival than elections. Bibb County never recovered all the jobs that it lost during the pandemic. Labor Department data shows it had more jobs in 2019 under President Donald Trump than it does now. Still to come, Secretary of State.
Ignoring the fact that Bill Clinton was nominated there in 1992 and Jimmy Carter was nominated there in 1976 and again in 1980, and ignoring the history of the Democrat Party in the 1924 convention held in Madison Square Garden, attended by so many members of the Ku Klux Klan in white robes that they called it colloquially the Klan Bake, because there were so many Klan members there. And for them to sort of bring up unpleasant associations with Madison Square Garden itself, I think is backfiring on their party and on their candidate.
Bart Marconis, former presidential campaign advisor.